The woman lying beneath the endless New Mexico sky had been there for 3 nights, and Harrison Yates had watched her each time from his porch, wondering if she was a ghost or just desperate. He had built his ranch on the outskirts of Lordsburg 7 years ago, carving out a life from the stubborn desert land that stretched toward the distant mountains. The year was 1884, and the territory was still rough around the edges, though not quite as wild as it had been in his father's time. Harrison was 32, weathered by sun and hard work, and he had learned to mind his own business. But this woman sleeping under the cottonwood trees near the creek that bordered his property had gotten under his skin in a way he could not explain. She arrived each evening just before sunset, carrying a single bundle wrapped in faded cloth. She would settle herself beneath the same tree, spread out what looked like a thin blanket, and lie down as the stars emerged. Harrison had ridden close enough on the second day to see she was young, maybe in her early 20s, with dark hair that fell past her shoulders and a dress that had seen better days. She did not look hurt or sick, just tired in a way that went deeper than needing sleep. On the fourth morning, Harrison made a decision that surprised even himself. He walked to his barn and began pulling out lumber he had been saving for a new storage shed. His foreman, an older Mexican man named Carlos, found him an hour later, already measuring and cutting boards. "What are you building, patron?" Carlos asked, removing his hat to wipe his brow. "A house," Harrison said simply. "For who?" Harrison looked toward the cottonwood trees in the distance. "For someone who needs it." Carlos followed his gaze and nodded slowly. He had seen the woman too. "You know her name?" "No." "You know anything about her?" "No." Carlos was quiet for a moment, then picked up a hammer. "Then I guess we better make it sturdy. Cannot trust someone you do not know in a house that might fall down." They worked through that day and the next, framing up a small cabin near the main ranch house but far enough to give privacy. Harrison hired 2 of his ranch hands to help, and together they raised walls, fitted a roof, and installed a door that hung straight and true. He built a stone fireplace, thinking of cold desert nights. He added a window facing east to catch the morning sun and another facing the mountains. The woman continued her nightly routine, seemingly unaware or perhaps just too weary to care about the construction happening a quarter-mile away. Harrison found himself working with an urgency he had not felt in years, driving nails with fierce concentration and cutting boards with exacting precision. He built shelves and a simple bed frame. He brought a mattress from town, along with blankets and a pillow. He installed hooks on the walls for hanging clothes and a small table with 2 chairs. On the 7th day, as the sun climbed high and hot, Harrison stood back and surveyed his work. The house was simple but solid, with whitewashed walls and a covered porch. It looked like a home. "You going to tell her about it?" Carlos asked. Harrison had not thought that far ahead. "I suppose I should." That evening he waited on his own porch until he saw her familiar figure walking toward the cottonwood trees. His heart hammered in his chest as he stood and made his way across the dusty ground between them. She had just settled onto her blanket when his shadow fell across her. She looked up quickly, eyes wide and alert. They were green, he noticed, the color of new grass after rain, and they held both wariness and something else, something broken. "Evening, madam," Harrison said, removing his hat. "I do not mean to startle you." She sat up but said nothing, watching him with the careful attention of someone who had learned not to trust easily. "I have been watching you sleep out here," Harrison continued, then realized how that sounded. Not in a strange way. "I own this ranch, and I noticed you have been coming here for several nights." Still, she remained silent. "I built you a house," he said, the words tumbling out more awkwardly than he had intended. It is small, but it has a roof and walls and a fireplace. You can stay there if you want." No strings attached. Her lips parted slightly in surprise. "You built me a house." Her voice was soft, almost musical, with an accent he could not quite place. "Eastern, maybe." "Yes, madam." "Why?" Harrison shifted his weight, feeling foolish. "Because nobody should have to sleep under the stars unless they want to." She studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to read his intentions written there. "And what do you want in return?" "Nothing," Harrison said firmly. "The house is yours. You can stay as long as you need. Work on the ranch if you want to earn your keep, but that is up to you. Leave whenever you are ready. No obligations." A tear slid down her cheek, catching the dying light. She wiped it away quickly. "I do not understand." "Neither do I fully," Harrison admitted. "But the house is there, and you are welcome to it." He pointed toward the small cabin, visible now in the distance. She turned to look, her expression unreadable. "Would you like to see it?" he asked. After a long pause, she nodded. She gathered her bundle and blanket, and Harrison walked beside her across the scrubland. Neither spoke. The only sounds were their footsteps and the evening wind whistling through the sage. When they reached the cabin, Harrison opened the door and stepped aside. She moved past him slowly, her eyes taking in every detail. She touched the wall as if to confirm it was real, then moved to the window, the fireplace, the bed with its clean blankets folded at the foot. "There is a well nearby," Harrison said from the doorway. "And you are welcome to take meals at the main house, or I can bring food here, whatever you prefer." She turned to face him, and in the dim light he could see she was crying in earnest now, silent tears streaming down her face. "I do not even know your name." "Harrison Yates. I own this ranch." "I am Zelda," she said quietly. "Zelda Vaughn." "Well, Miss Vaughn, I hope you will be comfortable here." She crossed the small room and, to his surprise, took his hand in both of hers. Her skin was rough and calloused, the hands of someone who had worked hard. "Thank you," she whispered. "You cannot know what this means." Harrison felt heat rise to his face. "You are welcome. I will leave you to settle in. If you need anything, the main house is right over there." He extracted his hand as gently as he could and stepped out into the evening. As he walked away, he felt her eyes on his back, and when he finally turned to look, she was standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light from inside. That night, Harrison lay awake in his own bed, wondering what had possessed him to build a house for a complete stranger. He was not an impulsive man. He had built his ranch through careful planning and hard work, never taking unnecessary risks. Yet something about Zelda Vaughn had called to him, had made him want to offer shelter and safety without question or condition. The next morning he found a loaf of bread wrapped in cloth on his porch. It was still warm, clearly baked in the early hours. Harrison smiled and took it inside. Over the following days, they fell into an unspoken routine. Zelda kept to herself mostly, but Harrison would occasionally see her tending a small garden she had started near her cabin or walking along the creek. She left him small gifts: bread, wildflowers in a jar, once a shirt she had mended that he had left hanging torn on a fence post. A week after she moved into the cabin, Harrison worked up the courage to invite her to dinner at the main house. He found her outside, hanging laundry on a line she had strung between two posts. "Miss Vaughn," he called out. She turned, shielding her eyes from the sun. "Mr. Yates. I was wondering if you might join me for supper tonight. Nothing fancy, just stew and biscuits, but I thought it might be nice to have company." She hesitated, and he thought she might refuse. Then she nodded. "I would like that." That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Zelda arrived at his door wearing the same dress but with her hair braided and wound at the base of her neck. She looked younger somehow, and nervous. Harrison had set the table carefully, using the good plates his mother had left him. The stew simmered on the stove, filling the house with the rich smell of beef and vegetables. They sat across from each other, and for several minutes they ate in silence. Then Harrison, unable to bear the quiet any longer, asked, "Where are you from originally?" Zelda set down her spoon. "Pennsylvania. A small town you would not have heard of." "What brought you all the way out here?" Her face clouded. "That is a long story." "I've got time if you want to tell it." She took a breath. "I was married. My husband heard about opportunities out west, mining and such. We traveled here 2 years ago with a wagon train. He found work in Silver City, but it was dangerous work. He died in a cave in last winter." "I am sorry," Harrison said quietly. "I had nothing left," Zelda continued, her voice steady but her eyes bright with unshed tears. "No money, no family. I worked where I could, but it was never enough. I made my way here to Lordsburg hoping for something better, but I arrived with almost nothing. I had been sleeping under those trees trying to figure out what to do next, and then you built me a house." Harrison felt his chest tighten. "You have been through a lot." "I have survived," she corrected. "There is a difference." "Yes, there is." They finished their meal, and the conversation grew easier. Zelda asked about the ranch, and Harrison found himself telling her about his years building it up, about the droughts and the good seasons, about his dreams of expanding the herd. She listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed she understood the life. "You know anything about ranching?" he asked. "A bit. My father had a small farm back east. I know my way around animals and hard work. Would you be interested in helping out here? I could use an extra hand, and it would give you steady pay." Zelda met his eyes. "I would like that very much," and so she became part of the ranch. She proved herself capable and tireless, rising before dawn to help with feeding and mucking stalls, learning the rhythms of the work with impressive speed. The ranch hands accepted her presence with barely a raised eyebrow. In the West, people did not ask too many questions about where you came from or what you were running from. Harrison found himself looking for excuses to work near her, to catch glimpses of her bent over a task, or hear her voice as she spoke gently to the horses. She had a way with animals that surprised him. The most ornery mare in his stable, a paint horse that bucked off every rider, would stand calm as Sunday for Zelda. "What is your secret?" Harrison asked one day, watching as she brushed the mare's coat. Zelda smiled, the first real smile he had seen from her. It transformed her face. "No secret. I just let her know I understand her." "Understand what?" "That she is scared. That she has been hurt before and does not want to be hurt again." Harrison realized they were not just talking about the horse anymore. As spring turned to summer, the ranch thrived. The cattle fattened on good grass, and Harrison made a profitable sale to a buyer heading north. He gave Zelda a generous share, which she tried to refuse until he insisted. "You earned it," he said. "Fair pay for fair work." She tucked the money into her pocket, then looked at him with an expression he could not read. "Why are you so kind to me?" Harrison had asked himself the same question 100 times. "Because you deserve kindness." "You do not know me well enough to know what I deserve." "I know enough." She stepped closer, and he caught the scent of soap and sunshine. "What do you know, Harrison Yates?" His name on her lips did something to him. "I know you work harder than anyone I have ever met. I know you have been knocked down by life, but you get back up. I know you have a good heart. You see all that, I do." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers light against his cheek. "You are a good man." Harrison caught her hand and held it. "Zelda, I have to tell you something. I did not build that house out of pure charity. I built it because from the first moment I saw you, I felt something. I do not know how to explain it, but I knew I had to keep you safe. I knew I had to make sure you were all right." Her eyes searched his. "That is why you never asked my name before building it, because you did not need to know my name to know you wanted to help me." "Yes," she laughed, a sound like water over stones. "That is the most foolish, wonderful thing I have ever heard." "Is it?" "Yes." She stepped even closer. "And I think I have been half in love with you since you opened the door to that little house and told me it was mine." Harrison felt his heart stop, then start again at double speed. "Only half, maybe more than half," she admitted. He cupped her face in his hands, rough rancher's hands against her soft skin. "Can I kiss you?" "I wish you would." When their lips met, it felt like coming home. Harrison poured everything he felt into that kiss. His loneliness, his hope, his growing love for this strong, beautiful woman who had appeared in his life like an answer to a prayer he had not known he was praying. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Zelda rested her forehead against his chest and he wrapped his arms around her. "What do we do now?" she asked. "I suppose we figure it out together." Over the following weeks, they grew inseparable. They worked side by side during the day and sat together on the porch in the evenings, watching the stars emerge in the vast sky. Harrison told her about his childhood, about losing his parents to fever, about the years he spent working on other people's ranches before saving enough to buy his own land. Zelda shared more of her story too, her childhood in Pennsylvania, her hopes when she married, the crushing grief of losing her husband so far from home. "You still love him?" Harrison asked one night, the question that had been haunting him. Zelda was quiet for a long moment. "I loved who I thought he was, but we were so young and we never really got the chance to know each other as people. The life out here was so different from what either of us expected. I grieved him and I still feel sad about his death. But what I feel for you is different, deeper, more real." "I love you," Harrison said, the words coming easier than he expected. "I have loved you since before I knew your name." She turned to him, tears glistening. "I love you too." He kissed her again, there under the stars where he had first seen her sleeping, alone and vulnerable. Now she was here in his arms, choosing him as he had chosen her. "Marry me," Harrison said suddenly. Zelda pulled back to look at him. "What? Marry me?" he repeated. "I know it might seem too soon, but I have never been more certain of anything. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life with you, a real life. Say yes." She laughed and cried at the same time. "Yes. Yes, of course, yes." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Lordsburg, with Carlos and his wife as witnesses. Zelda wore a new dress that Harrison had bought her from the general store, simple but beautiful in pale blue cotton. Harrison wore his best suit, the one he saved for rare trips to town. The ceremony was brief, but when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison felt a completeness he had never known. This woman who had been sleeping under the stars was now his partner, his love, his future. They moved Zelda's few belongings into the main house, though she insisted on keeping the little cabin. "For guests," she said, "or maybe one day for a child who wants their own space." The mention of children made Harrison's breath catch. "You want children, do you?" "I never let myself think about it much," he admitted. "But with you, yes. I want everything with you." Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a joining not just of bodies but of souls. Harrison marveled at the trust Zelda placed in him, at the way she gave herself fully, holding nothing back. And in the morning, waking with her in his arms, he sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for whatever fortune had brought her to his land. Life settled into a new rhythm. Zelda proved not just a capable ranch hand but a true partner in every sense. She had ideas for improving efficiency, for breeding better horses, for marketing their beef. Harrison listened and implemented her suggestions, delighted to find they shared not just love, but a vision for their future. The ranch prospered. They added more acres, more cattle, more horses. Zelda started breeding the ornery paint mare, and the foals sold for good money. She had an eye for quality that matched Harrison's own. A year into their marriage, Zelda told him she was pregnant. Harrison lifted her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. He became impossibly protective, insisting she rest more, work less. She tolerated his fussing with good humor, but refused to be treated like an invalid. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she reminded him. "I am strong. Our child will be strong." She was right. When their son was born on a clear spring morning, he came into the world wailing and healthy, with his mother's green eyes and his father's strong chin. They named him Henry after Harrison's father. Harrison held his son in those first moments and felt his world expand. He looked at Zelda, exhausted but glowing with joy, and loved her even more than he thought possible. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything, for being here, for loving me. For this. Thank you for building me a house before you even knew my name," she replied, reaching for his hand. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. You were never invisible to me." As Henry grew, he brought new life to the ranch. His laughter echoed through the house. He took his first steps on the porch where Harrison and Zelda had shared their first kiss as a married couple. He learned to ride almost before he could walk, sitting in front of his mother on the patient paint mare. 2 years later, Zelda gave birth to twin girls. They named them Rose and Ruth, and they were as different as night and day. Rose was quiet and thoughtful, while Ruth was all fire and energy. Harrison had his hands full with 3 young children, but he loved every chaotic moment. The ranch continued to grow. Harrison and Zelda built a larger barn and hired more hands. Carlos remained the foreman, now with his own sons working alongside him. The little cabin Zelda had first lived in became a playhouse for the children, a place where they would spend hours creating imaginary worlds. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Harrison took Zelda back to the cottonwood trees by the creek where he had first seen her sleeping. "You remember?" he asked. "Every detail," she said. "I was so lost then, so alone. I thought I might die out here, that nobody would even notice or care." "I noticed. You did more than notice. You built me a house, you gave me a home, you gave me a life." Harrison pulled her close. "You gave me everything. Before you, I was just going through motions, building a ranch but not really living. You taught me what it means to truly be alive." "We saved each other," Zelda said simply. They stood there as the sun set, wrapped in each other's arms, while in the distance, they could hear the children playing and the sounds of the ranch settling in for the evening. Years passed. Henry grew into a young man with his father's work ethic and his mother's gentle way with animals. Rose became a teacher in Lordsburg, bringing education to the growing town. Ruth surprised everyone by becoming a skilled blacksmith, learning the trade from an old-timer in town, and eventually taking over his shop. Harrison and Zelda grew older together, their love deepening with each passing season. They sat on the porch in the evenings, watching grandchildren play where they had once worked, where Zelda had once helped birth calves and mend fences. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Zelda asked one evening, her head resting on Harrison's shoulder. "If you had not built that house, if you had just let me be." "I think about it sometimes," Harrison admitted, "but I cannot really imagine it. Building you that house was the most natural thing I have ever done. It felt like destiny." Maybe it was. The ranch had become one of the most successful in the territory, then in the state when New Mexico eventually achieved statehood. But Harrison and Zelda never forgot their humble beginning. They quietly helped others who arrived in Lordsburg with nothing, offering work or assistance without fanfare. Once, Harrison found a young couple sleeping under those same cottonwood trees. He smiled and went back to the barn, where he and his sons began building another small cabin. "Who is it for, Papa?" Henry asked. "People who need it," Harrison replied. "Like your mother once did." When Zelda saw what they were doing, she wept happy tears and joined in the work. The cabin was completed and offered freely, just as hers had been. The couple who received it eventually became trusted friends and part of the ranch's extended family. On their 20th anniversary, Harrison had a surprise for Zelda. He led her out to the original cabin, which they had maintained all these years. Inside, he had recreated it exactly as it had been that first night when he showed it to her. The same blankets on the bed, wildflowers on the table, a fire crackling in the fireplace. "I wanted to take you back," he said, "to the beginning." Zelda walked through the space, touching everything with reverent fingers. "I was so scared that night, scared it was not real, scared it would be taken away, scared to hope. And now," she turned to him with eyes full of love, "now I know that the best things in life are the ones we dare to hope for. You taught me that." They stayed in the cabin that night, making love with the passion of newlyweds and the tenderness of old partners. In the morning, they walked hand in hand back to the main house, where their family waited. As Harrison entered his 60s, he began to slow down, though he never stopped working entirely. Henry had taken over most of the day-to-day operations, proving himself a worthy successor. But Harrison still rose early most mornings to check on the horses, to walk the land he loved. Zelda remained his constant companion. Her hair had gone silver, and lines creased her face, but to Harrison, she was as beautiful as the day he first saw her sleeping under the stars. "Do you have any regrets?" she asked him one day. "Not a single one," Harrison said honestly. Only that I did not find you sooner, that we did not have even more time together." "We have time yet," Harrison assured her, and they did. Years more of mornings drinking coffee together, of watching their grandchildren grow, of sitting on the porch and holding hands as the sun set over the land they had built together. When Harrison finally passed in his sleep at the age of 78, Zelda was beside him. He went peacefully, a smile on his face, his hand in hers. His last words were simple: "Thank you for sleeping under my stars." Zelda lived 3 more years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, sharing stories of the remarkable man who had built her a house before asking her name. She tended the ranch with the help of her family, ensuring Harrison's legacy continued. On a warm spring evening, Zelda walked out to the cottonwood trees by the creek. She had felt tired lately, ready to rest. She lay down on the grass where she had once slept alone and afraid, and looked up at the stars emerging in the darkening sky. She thought of Harrison, of his strong hands and gentle heart. She thought of the house he had built, of the life they had created, of the love that had sustained them through everything. As the stars grew brighter, Zelda closed her eyes and smiled. She felt no fear, only peace. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear Harrison calling her name. The family found her there the next morning, lying peacefully beneath the cottonwood trees, finally reunited with the man who had loved her enough to build her a home before he even knew who she was. They buried Zelda and Harrison side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a shared headstone that read simply, "She slept under the stars. He built her a house. Together they built a life." Henry and his sisters ensured the ranch continued to thrive, passing it down through generations. The original cabin was preserved as a memorial, a testament to the extraordinary love story that had begun with a simple act of kindness. And sometimes, on clear nights, Ranch hands swore they could see two figures walking hand in hand near the cottonwood trees, outlined against the starlight, forever together in the land they had loved. The ranch became known not just for its cattle and horses, but for its heart, for the kindness that Harrison and Zelda had built into its very foundation. Every person who worked there knew the story, and it inspired them to look after one another, to offer help before it was asked for, to build homes not just with wood and nails but with love and compassion. Children grew up hearing the tale of the rancher who built a house for a stranger, and they learned that the greatest acts of love are often the simplest ones. That sometimes, helping someone in need without expecting anything in return can change not just their life, but your own in ways you never imagined. The little cabin stood for generations, carefully maintained by the family as a reminder of where it all began. Couples would sometimes ask permission to spend their wedding night there, wanting to start their own marriages in a place blessed by such a powerful love story. And the cottonwood trees by the creek continued to grow, their branches reaching toward the sky, sheltering new generations who came to hear the story and to wonder at the kind of love that builds houses for strangers and turns them into family. In the end, Harrison and Zelda's legacy was not just the prosperous ranch or the family they had created, but the reminder that love, real love, sees a need and meets it. It builds when others might turn away. It hopes when everything seems hopeless. It dares to offer shelter to a stranger and discovers in doing so that it has found home. Their story lived on, told and retold, a beacon of light in the sometimes harsh landscape of the West. It reminded people that even in the hardest times, in the wildest places, love could take root and flourish, transforming lives in ways both small and profound. And somewhere, beyond the stars they had both loved so much, Harrison and Zelda walked together still, their love eternal, their story complete, their hearts forever intertwined in the land where he had built her a house before asking her name, and she had given him her heart before knowing all that it would mean. The stars continued to shine over Lordsburg, over the ranch, over the little cabin and the cottonwood trees. They shone on the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried forward the legacy of love and kindness. They shone on the land that had witnessed such devotion, such transformation, such a perfect example of what it means to love without condition. And if you listened carefully on quiet nights, some said you could hear music drifting on the wind, a song of love that began with a simple question unasked, and an answer given freely, a melody that would play forever in the hearts of all who knew the story of the rancher and the woman who slept under the stars.